there's a saying, your network is your net worth. People underestimate how much a network can open doors and opportunities for them in all aspects. There's a lot of good educators in healthcare, but a really great one is rare to find. And when you find one, you've got to hold on to them, and you've got to absolutely soak up everything that they have to offer you. There's a lot of people that really do love educating, and you need to, definitely seek that connection, seek that follow up, because you could be paired with somebody for a day, and unless you go that extra mile to, reach out and say, hey, I'd really love to connect with you afterwards, etc., you might never see them again.
Hey, my name is Anisha Patel, and I'm obsessed with all things career development. Whether that's navigating your professional journey, gaining clarity, or building the confidence to reach your goals, I'm here to support you in crafting your roadmap to success. I've grown a podcast that has reached thousands of people across the globe. I'm growing an online business, and I'm stepping outside of my 9-to-5 to build a career of my dreams. I've walked the path of transformation myself, and now I'm here to share insights, strategies, and stories to help you carve out a career that you love, or even a podcast you've been dreaming of creating, but you've not taken the leap to start yet. If you want to connect with me in between podcast episodes, I share my personal career insights and behind-the-scenes stories with my newsletter community, which you can join using the link in the show notes. This is the Pharmacist Diaries podcast. Hey there, pharmacy family. We need to talk about something major. For those just joining, I'm Anisha, and this is the final episode in my 3-part series with the incredible Leya Luhar. If you thought the pharmacy profession wasn't changing fast enough, well, hold on to your lab coats. You might have heard whispers about the big 2026 changes, but there's so much confusion out there. As someone who is already a prescriber and works alongside doctors daily, I knew we needed to break this down properly. And that's why I brought Leya onto the podcast, because who better to talk about the diagnostic skills and clinical reasoning than someone in the thick of medical training. By 2026, every single pharmacy graduate will qualify as a prescriber. This is huge. Together with Leya, we're breaking down so many things. What this massive change really means for pharmacy students, the clinical skills you'll need to develop, how your training will change, including those all-important placements, what you can learn from medical students about diagnostic reasoning, the real challenges and opportunities ahead, and how to prepare yourself for this exciting change. I'm super excited to get into this conversation, so let's just dive right into it. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Episode 3.
Yes, last one.
I know, I'm excited though.
Me too.
I'm excited about change. I love change.
Yes.
Change is good for pharmacy, for medicine. I think a lot of people have been a little bit anxious about this change in pharmacy. Maybe because there's limited information out there, or we don't know how to implement the changes into place. Universities are having to switch curriculum. Placements are altering. Supervisors need extra training to make sure that all these students up and running in the right format that we need. But now we're getting used to the idea. I think we are on the right path. But for students, I still feel like there's a little bit of an unknown.
Yeah.
And they don't exactly know what it means to become a prescriber and in what context, because the traditional pharmacist who has been working for multiple years, they might have done their clinical diploma, they've embedded themselves into a hospital environment and become a specialist in a certain area, then makes a decision to become a prescriber. So they already know like the area of expertise that they want to go into. Mine was pediatrics and then choosing palliative care specifically. So I knew how to implement the prescribing role into my current position. But when you're a student and you don't necessarily know exactly what career pathway you're going into, what specialist areas you're going to like, obviously there is some uncertainty. But I think we just kind of have to have an open mindset, understand we need to be a bit flexible and go with the flow. And change is good. It really puts you out your comfort zone and makes you a stronger practitioner. And I think part of the journey as a student is to level up. on the skills that you need. So it doesn't matter which specialty that you're in or what you might be doing as a prescriber, you've got all the right clinical skills to kind of get you to that point. And that leads into the first thing that I want to talk about, is that clinical reasoning and diagnostic skills are completely new to pharmacy students. And as we shift the curriculum, they're having to learn a lot about this. What's your perspective on how they can make that shift, or what they can actually do in terms of the strategies to build that kind of skill set?
So, yeah, I think it's very exciting because when we actually look at research that has been done of opinions of the pharmacy curriculum in the UK historically, a lot of the inputs from students is that they actually prefer the patient-facing side of things and the actual clinical side, including things like diagnostic reasoning. That's the areas that they actually want to see more of historically. And a lot of students actually aren't the ones that are huge proponents of the more kind of science-based, heavy chemistry-focused parts of the curriculum. That's actually usually been found to be staffs that are more proponents of it. So the curriculum is actually changing in line with student preference based on the research that is out there. So it's very exciting, to be fair. And it is going to, like you said, require changes in both mindset, but also in practical strategies that students can actually use to now meet the new kind of expectations of not only the new curriculum, but also what the role of a pharmacist will be. So including things like diagnostic reasoning. Now, these things that are going to be more of a focus in the new pharmacy curriculum are things that have been part of the medical school curriculum forever, basically, because they've always been part of the role of a doctor. So these are things that hopefully I could offer some advice for students for how can you actually improve your those clinical skills and those diagnostic reasoning skills. Now, a lot of it is actually being in the right environment. So that's why generally most schools are now actually increasing placement time on curriculums. And that means that as a student, you have more of a chance to actually practice those skills. So a big part of the clinical skills, the increased diagnostic reasoning, is practice with patients. Take every opportunity that you can to actually practice doing a history taking with a patient and actually practicing your diagnostic reasoning skills, and then going and reading the notes afterwards to see how close you were and talking to a clinician about it. That's similar with little prescribing activities. So you could, for example, take a history from a patient and then say to a pharmacist you want to practice with the drug chart, for example, practice actually prescribing something if you have a prescribing supervisor. So these are, when we go to placement as medical students, we generally, a lot of us will go with a little list of things that we want to get done. So I'd say taking more ownership of your learning and making sure that you get familiar with the new curriculum. What are actually the requirements? What do you need to be to be a good clinician, to be a good pharmacist, and make sure you get those activities done actually with real patients and with supervisors. So make use of your time and actually trying to achieve those things realistically. And if you're not able to do those things in practice, at Oski Toolbox, we do have a lot of scenarios. So we have prescription writing stations, and a lot of our stations are all about clinical scenarios. So counseling a patient. Diagnostic reasoning is a huge part, especially in responding to symptoms. In all our scenarios, pretty much we expect that you will provide a diagnosis, even if it's just to give a patient an idea of what you're thinking. So if you're not able to actually get those opportunities, or you're struggling to find them, or you want more, I would say to use our scenarios to hopefully help you do that, to supplement the learning that you're going to get embedded in your curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot for a student to take on. So traditionally, pharmacy students are very used to tasks that are practiced within their sort of dispensing classes that we have, as at most universities, and then implementing those same sort of tasks in a clinical environment. So examples are how to dispense a medication, how to label a medication, how to open up a CD register, the controlled drugs register, and log what you've dispensed, how many tablets are left, choosing the right product. You are learning how to counsel patients. So if you're in an outpatient pharmacy, you might be counseling a patient on a new medication that they collect from the pharmacy. Or if you're on the ward, you're taking these super thorough drug histories. And that is so specific to just the medication aspect, which is just one component of a medical history, right? But we are super good at doing that. We're very clear, structured in terms of how we approach the patient. We get that list. We use multiple resources. So you might speak to the patient. You look at the patient's own drugs that they bring in. You might look at the GP records to see what they were on at home. You might use family members, dossier boxes, parents, if you're dealing with children.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also combining that initial consultation with what's their lifestyle like, how much do they drink, are they smoking, do they take over-the-counter medications, are their vaccinations up to date, and looking at their allergy status. That's the bread and butter of like what a pharmacy student knows. And when you're shifting towards becoming a prescriber, you're not only understanding what medications to prescribe and how to write a prescription, which is really important, and I think we'll be really good at writing prescriptions because our bread and butter is to clinically screen them. So it's easy for us to kind of make that mindset shift. What's more challenging for a student is how do you take a full history in terms of what symptoms they're experiencing, what's their presenting complaint effectively, what's the history of that complaint? Have they had previous admissions? Have they been to the GP 4 or 5 times with this issue? What tests have already been done? How are they managing that in primary care or at home? And then shifting towards trying to understand the questions that you're going to ask to figure out what the problem is. What tests do you need to order? Are we going to do blood results? Are we looking at renal function, chest x-rays? Do we need to take a urine sample to see if they've got a urine infection? So your perspective on what you're actually doing in terms of your role is really expanding. And then you've obviously got the fact that you need to touch a patient now. Totally different. You've got physical assessment. You've got to use a stethoscope. You've got different tools that you have to get used to. You might be looking into someone's ear to see if there's, inflammation or if there's an infection. You might have to palpate and percuss a patient. It's a very different concept. And OSCEs are a great place to practice those skills and get comfortable with what you need to do. And obviously universities are preparing you for that. But one of the things that I think in terms of placements, and you talk about that, universities are increasing the number of hours that are expected of students. And even some of the universities are having to bring in like a summer term where students are going out on placements during their summer holidays, which is a hard shift. I get it. That's a totally challenging shift for a student because they may have holidays planned, internships. They may be, traveling back home if they're an international student and the last thing they want to do is stay at uni and do more work. But you kind of have to be a little bit flexible whilst we're still learning exactly how this is all going to look and pan out. And we got to test it out before we really perfect how the university curriculum runs. And when you go on to placements, even the tasks that you do will be more focused on spending time with doctors, taking medical histories, being in environments where you might be in a clinic. So you might be actively watching someone do an entire consultation, come up with a diagnosis and write a prescription similar to a GP practice. You could also shadow nurses. So when you think about observations, you're going to have to learn how to take a blood pressure, take somebody's temperature, take a heart rate, respiratory rate, all of those things that nurses would be doing every hour, some of them, or every 2 hours. They're so good at that. They spend time with nurses and ask a nurse, hey, can I do it? And you shadow me. Take initiative, think outside the box, and think of ways that you can learn, which is different to the very task-oriented, I need to tick these things off my list for my placement to be successful, because you kind of have to identify what your personal strengths are at this point. Some of you may be really, really good at the kind of diagnostic and kind of the gathering information, but then when it actually comes to physically assessing a patient, you freeze. But then some people will be the other way around. So it's kind of identifying what your own gaps in practice are and then kind of changing that. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about from a point of view of OSCE Toolbox and increasing the number of hours that students are doing in placements and how those placements are shifting in terms of their objectives. We've got EPAs. So can you dive into what an EPA is and what does that mean to a student as well?
Yeah, so an EPA stands for Entrustable Professional Activities. And these are really interesting. So they've been adapted So what's happened is in medicine, we have these sign-offs as medical students. And they vary per medical school, but they're pretty much mandatory at each medical school. And these are things that you have to be signed off as being competent on. So certain activities. So for example, taking blood from a patient, and potentially even interpreting certain blood tests, things like that. Now, with the new curriculum, the GPHC has come up with this list of 47 EPAs that are sort of a guide for what students should be able to do, and things that they can do during their placement. And with each of these EPAs, the goal is that a student will start with observing the skill, then they will execute it under supervision, then they'll be able to execute it unsupervised, and then they'll be able to supervise other learners who also do the skills. And examples of these EPAs, they range from things like dispensing medication, to administering immunizations, to coming up with a care plan. So there is a range. Now, these aren't mandatory, and I imagine each pharmacy school may or may not create a set of sign-offs, or they may or may not implement these in different ways. But they've been created as a guide to support pharmacy students to be able to be trained for their new responsibilities. And at OSCE Toolbox, a lot of our station types map directly to some of these EPAs. So, for example, one of the EPAs to do with counselling a patient or colleague on a medication, and we have medication counselling stations which are either with a doctor or a patient. But then we also do certain things like partnering with other companies. So, for example, for administering immunizations, we're partnering with Allied Health Training, who deliver vaccination training. So that's how we're kind of aligning with those EPAs. But EPAs are just a really interesting way to kind of directly identify the responsibilities that students should be aiming to make sure that they're competent within.
Yeah, it's really different, because I think when you're a pharmacy student, you're actively given sort of objectives that you need to cover, and now we're kind of, instead of being in a black and white environment, we're kind of molding into the grey. We're having to get students to identify some of their own learning objectives. And there is so much to cover. And like you said, they're not all kind of like mandatory, but they are a guide to help you figure out what you should be doing and what you might need to use. Now, administering vaccinations is not applicable to every pharmacist. You may not be in an environment where you need to do that, but it's obviously valuable to understand that you could be doing that. And if that's something of interest to you, if it's something that you think, actually, I'm going to work in a GP practice where we're potentially going to be having vaccination clinics, this is something in terms of a skill set that I need to learn, then you might have to step outside of your traditional kind of like stay in your lane university curriculum and think outside the box in terms of what you need to learn and why. And it's really valuable that you've got this resource available to pharmacy students. And from your own personal journey as a medical student, where you're learning a lot of these skills and then being able to teach others how to do it. I'm so excited for pharmacy students. They are so lucky to have someone who's really fighting their corner and helping them to grow professionally. And it's not coming from pharmacy as well. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of medical students as well. I mean, a lot of people don't know about this change. Medical students especially, they don't know, but I know that even if you're on placement as a pharmacy student and you see a medical student, because now that you're going to be there, you probably will, definitely chat to them, because I know that we make a great team. Pharmacists and medics, we make a great team, and we'll be more than happy to do activities together, teach you what we know. But yeah, no, it's very exciting.
Before we dive into the next part of this episode, I want to share something I've been absolutely loving lately. I bought these blue light blocking glasses from Ocushield, and I'm absolutely obsessed. As a pharmacy student or pharmacist, we are constantly staring at screens all day long. And for me personally, I'm also using them several evenings of the week when I work on my podcast. So I was feeling really guilty about this and having so much screen time in the evening, and I knew it was definitely impacting my sleep quality, so I treated myself to these glasses. I wear them every night when I get home from work, and I'm absolutely loving it. The frames are really stylish, and more importantly, they obviously filter out the really harsh blue light that can negatively impact your sleep cycle and cause eye fatigue. I've noticed a really big difference in my sleep quality, and I wanted to share it with you because it might be a tip for something that you could treat yourself to as well. I found a 20% off family and friends discount code on their website, which you can access from the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the episode. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
I think from a placement point of view, when you look at the challenges that some of our students are going to face when they go on to placements, is that it's the take initiative. The NHS in general is overwhelmed, under-resourced. You may be working alongside other trainee pharmacists who are going through the training journey. You may be with early careers pharmacists who don't have the prescribing qualification yet. So it's difficult to feel confident learning from individuals who don't yet even have the skill set that you're expected to learn. And this is where this transition phase is going to be a little bit challenging. But, 5 years from now, it's going to be completely different. I think you're going to have to step outside your comfort zone and get to know other healthcare professionals in order to learn. And just have awareness that when you go on to placement, maybe think about 2 or 3 things like you absolutely want to achieve before you get there. Like you said, you have your little task list of things that you want to do. If you know that taking observations on a patient is something that you're going to find challenging, just tag a nurse. And pharmacists who you work with, or trainee pharmacists who you work with, will not mind helping to support you to find someone. So you might not want to go up to a nurse and just be like, hey, I'm a student, I need help. If you feel uncomfortable making that initial connection, utilize your supervisor, your mentor, or someone else who's within pharmacy who may know that nurse, and just say, hey, can you help me with an introduction? I can see she's just about to go and do observations. Do you think that I can go shadow her? No nurse will ever say no. No, in the NHS, if you go onto a ward, no matter how busy people look, no matter how stressed out they may feel, people will always help you. And you just have to remind yourself that everybody's been in the place where you're at. Everybody has been through that journey of having to learn and disturb someone else from their routine in order to teach someone else. And if you want to grow, if you want to develop, if you want to be good at what you do, you have to step outside that comfort zone and be proactive and just say, hey, I need some help. I really want to be better at observations. Is something that came up in my OSCE. I didn't get a really good score. It's something I know I need to improve on. And I want to be able to observe a nurse doing 5 observations by the end of my week. How can I get that done? Because the pharmacists that you work with, if they see that you take initiative, if they see that you're showing enthusiasm, if they see the excitement that you want to grow, they will make it a reality for you. And that's kind of a mindset shift that students have to make, because sometimes when they go on placements, they kind of expect that the pharmacist they work with is going to give them everything that they need to fill their workbook. And that's not the case anymore. You kind of have to think outside of your kind of what you know as what placements kind of look like, and think, how can I achieve my own goals and my own targets? I don't know if I feel like medical students are completely left to their own devices, and it's so different to what pharmacy students experience and what they have awareness of or perception. What are your placements like when you go onto them? How much do you get from other people, or do you have to take the initiative?
So it does vary, but broadly speaking, I definitely think as soon as I got into the clinical environment, it was really up to me. Now, I personally quite enjoyed that because I've always been quite an autonomous learner. I don't actually really like rigidity or being handheld, and never have really, even from starting from secondary school. I really took ownership of my learning from early on. Even in college, I think that sometimes I didn't attend if I felt like the lecturer was teaching me in a way that I think I could have done a better job myself. So I wouldn't go and I'd teach myself, and I came out with brilliant grades. So I'm someone that is essentially, I'm quite optimal for that sort of environment. Some people struggled, and for a lot of people, that first year going clinical was really difficult for people to learn how to take ownership. So I can imagine that change will also be difficult for a lot of pharmacy students too. But it is true that a lot of the time we are kind of left to our own devices. Doctors are very welcoming in general, not just doctors, all healthcare professions, I would say, where it's sort of baked into who we are. We like helping people. That's a lot of the reason why we do medicine, or pharmacy, or any other healthcare field. Now, so they are generally quite helpful, but it can be difficult to even take that initial step and walk up to them and say, hi, my name is X. I'm the medical student or the pharmacy student. But usually just saying that is kind of enough for them to take you under their wing. A lot of them will say, okay, put your stuff over here, and then do you want to come? And then at that point, if there's anything that you want to do, is a great point to tell them, by the way, I really want to get this done today, and ask the questions like you said. Doing that early on, like you said, is so important, and that's what I will do as well. But sometimes there's so many times I've gone onto a ward with an objective. I'm not speaking to anybody. I've just gone to a patient. I'll take my history. I might ask. This happens obviously when you get more comfortable. But I might go to the doctor's office and say, "Hey, I want to take a history from a patient because I'm practicing my diagnostic skills. Can you recommend a patient that would be good to speak to?" And they'll be like, this patient or this patient, and this is where they are. They'll be really good to speak to. They're having lunch at this time, so do you want to catch them before? That sort of thing. And then I'll go and do it and then have a look at the notes afterwards. So you really do learn as you grow, but you have to push yourself a little bit further each time. So starting off by just, introducing yourself, and then, maybe asking something out of your comfort zone, and just building a rapport as well with the clinicians is really helpful. Getting to know them, how they got to do what they do, and what they recommend for you as well. And all of that is really valuable. But I definitely think it's very different. My friend Samaya, who is actually on Oski Toolbox, she's doing medicine now. She's in her 3rd year of medicine, and she is a qualified pharmacist. So she works all the time, actually. She works as a hospital pharmacist at the same time, to sort of fund her journey. And she told me that as a pharmacy student, she was always, when she was at placement, there was always somebody there for her that was expecting her. And she did feel that a lot of it was very handheld and guided. Whereas as a medical student, a lot of the time you turn up, people aren't expecting you there. Nobody knows that you're meant to be there. You're going to be there that day, and you are very much left to your own devices. So that was her experience. So, yeah.
That's, totally different, isn't it? But I think when you turn up into a very busy environment and you can totally see that the pharmacist is stretched, busy, trying to do a million things, if you've got a list of a few things that you want to get done, then your mindset automatically shifts that how can I get this done? And most of the time when you turn up for a pharmacy placement, yes, you are met. And sometimes you're given a tour of the hospital. You're shown all the, fire exits, toilets, where you can get lunch. You're kind of buddied up with someone, so you are kind of handheld. But you probably only have on the first day an opportunity to really sit down with your mentor or your supervisor. And if you're a prepared student, you tell them what you want to achieve. You're like, cool, I've got this workbook. I've got to get the workbook done. But this is where I feel like I've got a gap in my knowledge or my confidence, what I want to achieve personally, and ask, what are the opportunities on this ward that will allow me to achieve this? Is there an MDT that I can attend where all the doctors sit around with nurses and other healthcare professionals and make decisions about patient care? Is there a ward round that happens at a certain time of day that I can attend? Is there a clinic that is linked to this specialist area where post-surgery, as an example, they come up for a month later to a follow-up clinic or maybe an anticoagulation clinic where I can see the patient journey from a different perspective, where they're going to be prescribing the whole time or doing medical history taking, or they're going to be doing observations on a patient, and how can I achieve what I want to achieve? You have to be more prepared. And I think that's something that we really need to just hone in on this episode, because I think things are shifting so much and you just cannot expect that everything's going to be handed to you on a silver platter. I mean, in the ideal world, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? But I think you also have to, you got to take ownership of your own learning.
But it prepares you, I think, as well, because as a clinician, you're going to have to do your own learning, and I think it prepares you to be very independent. So I feel quite prepared, to be honest. I feel like my medical school journey and the fact that placements are structured the way they are, I feel like was preparing me very well to do my FY1 training. And I feel like if I'd been handheld this whole way, I don't think I would feel as prepared or as confident.
Another thing that's really valuable is that when you start a ward sort of placement and you're surrounded by all these healthcare professionals, it's an incredible opportunity to network, to find mentors who you can connect with outside of the placement, to have a connection with someone within the hospital to then ask, hey, are there any summer placements or things that are happening within the hospital that I could potentially apply for? Because I really enjoyed working with you. I really loved your teaching style. I feel like I'm so inspired by your journey. Is there anything else that I could do in terms of a project that you're working on that I could come back in the summer and help you with? Because your network is going to be golden for your future. When you're applying for jobs as a newly qualified pharmacist, some of these things, like especially the connections, the enthusiasm, the excitement for pharmacy, the interest that you demonstrate during that placement will be remembered by individuals within the pharmacy team. And then when you put your application in online through the NHS Jobs website, you'll be remembered. You might be top of the list. So when you get your interview, it's really exciting for that pharmacist to see that, hey, you spent 4 weeks with us. We loved having you on placement. You were such a joy as a student and we want to hire you. And it makes a massive difference. And connecting with people through face-to-face interaction is my favorite way of doing it. And placements are obviously a great opportunity for that. But I also think that we live in a digital world and there are ways for you to gain mentorship and guidance and advice through social media even. LinkedIn is one of my favorite platforms. You can connect with thousands of professionals in an area of expertise that you might be interested in. So make sure that you kind of get on LinkedIn, build a profile, even if it's a basic one, and start connecting with people.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. There's a saying, your network is your net worth. I love that saying, and I definitely agree. I think people underestimate how much a network can open doors and opportunities for them in all aspects. There's a book called The Third Door by Alex Badayan. Highly recommend that to anybody interested in entrepreneurship in any form, or even just branching out of their day to day. But yeah, I agree. Having good, there's a lot of good educators in healthcare, but a really great one is rare to find. And when you find one, you've got to hold on to them, and you've got to absolutely soak up everything that they have to offer you. There's a lot of people that really do love educating, and you need to, definitely seek that connection, seek that follow up, because you could be paired with somebody for a day, and unless you go that extra mile to reach out and say, hey, I'd really love to connect with you afterwards, etc., you might never see them again. Or they could become your supervisor for a really massive life-changing project for you, your first paper, and that what happens is up to you.
Agreed. And the last thing I wanted to get across, which actually came from you, and not necessarily from me, is that pharmacists are literally the best positioned individuals to prescribe. Like, as a medication expert and someone who comes out of university knowing everything and anything about medicines, you're in such a good position to be a great prescriber, reduce errors by the fact that you are amazing at putting pen to paper and writing a very accurate, well-written, well-signed, clear and legible as well prescription in comparison to doctors, because all we do all day is fix a lot of errors that come from our doctors and make sure that what we're prescribing is safe. So if that gives you a little bit of confidence along the way, then that's really valuable to share.
Yeah, that's in the research as well. It's not just a theory. Like, the research, the literature shows time and time again, when pharmacists are involved in prescribing and medications, there's reduced medication errors and there's better patient outcomes.
Yeah, agreed. That's an amazing way to end our 3-part series.
Definitely.
I wanted to, it's a genuine thank you for our friendship, our connection, and just, doing something different. And I think pharmacy students, A-level students kind of listening or watching this series will find it really valuable. There's a lot of general guidance, a lot of tips, a lot of insights from our own journeys as well that will hopefully be, useful in terms of the learning. And I just want to also thank you for your time, because you have taken a lot of time to research this topic. We've had multiple meetings to make sure that we are on the right page in terms of what information we want to give. And you're here, like, you've traveled here today, and you've given me half a day of your time. So thank you.
Well, thank you actually for responding to me. I know you have a lot of people that reach out to you, and you're the one who took the time to actually respond to me and give me this opportunity. So I'm very grateful to you. And yeah. And all you listeners are very lucky to have Anisha as well, giving her wisdom for free to all of you.
Yeah, okay, cool. So thanks.
Thank you.
Here's a mistake most people make when choosing a supplement: not considering the source of the ingredients. Many supplements use synthetic vitamins within their ingredients. This means they have been made in bulk in factories to mimic natural vitamins. They are chemically identical to vitamins found in nature and often more cost-effective and widely available. However, and this is the most important point to remember, natural supplements and those that come from plants, fruits, or other natural sources have additional benefits and often contain extra nutrients, fibers, and plant compounds that support your overall health, and they are generally easier for the body to absorb. Check out thenakedpharmacy.com, where you can find naturally sourced supplements for your health and well-being. Use code PD20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase.